monitoring and evaluation of impact assessment is based on a on a PDCA, plan, do, check, act, will. This is what you can see on this picture, which comes from the reference material of the UNDP. And this is what you can find also on this picture, which comes from another standards based on climate, biodiversity, and community. So it's planning, monitoring, evaluating the programs, the impact. And I think something is missing, and that's maybe interesting to integrate. It is, we spoke about Yang and Ying, and I think this is very young, and maybe we can integrate some new step, like the step linked with dream, vision, imagination, and another step linked with celebration, would help us to reconnect to this imagination part. Concerning the assessment tools, there's a lot. And each field, each sector have its own, developed its own, and I think economic and monetary innovation should take the inspiration and take the information that already exists in this field and adapt it to its field by creating new indicators linked with other areas. If you focus on impact assessment, on impact finance area, there's also a lot of different approach. So impact finance is investment or credit or donation, and then you really assess the impact is, okay, we finance this project, but for which purpose? If you go on Foundation Center of the TRASI, you will find all of those tools. And as you can see, few of them are based on assessment, like impact assessment. Few of them are based on quantitative indicators. And on impact finance, there's a lot of system work based on management and rating, and most of them actually are based on assessment. In the complementary currency field, an initiative has been made to propose some indicators. On this, it's especially for time banks, but there's very interesting idea and proposition for indicators. Complementary currency project. They need conventional money. 74% of the financing come from conventional money. Through private donation, external financial or external money tax. And this is what is important. Because either through a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach, complementary currency projects like development projects need time, need competencies, need commitment, and need people together to work on these projects. So they need energy, and this energy can come from money. So impact reporting could look like that. So monitoring and evaluation part, then you go to the design and implementation of the impact assessment. Then you can prove the impact, and finally you get the fund. Because this is what they need and what we need. The young economy, they need information, they need measurement, they need rationality, and they need analysis. This is how they will give the money to the yin economy. And the yin economy, what they need is energy, transdisciplinarity in order to work together. So the proposition is to create impact assessment, impact reporting, to be a go-between between the donors and the project leaders. The donors give the money to the project leaders, and the project leaders give back an impact assessment. And an impact analysis, impact report analysis structure can be between those two in order to help the project leaders to create the impact assessment that the donors need, and also to help the project leaders to create the impact assessment they need for themselves in order to improve the project. There's already some standards for this kind of report, which come from the Global Reporting Initiative. And for the proposition of the balanced scorecard of impact indicators, we should start with the objectives of complementary currencies. Each project has its own objective. I won't go through, but there's a lot of different ones. And this is what it's all about. We spoke about a vision, okay, which is here. Then we have a strategy for the project, and then we create the impact assessment, the specific indicators in order to reach them. And here you can find the proposition I made based on different topics: economic, social, environmental issue. And I think in these indicators, we may also integrate some tools and assessment linked with intangible things, cultural things, and also vision and personal development. Because this is what it's all about the yin and the yang, how to reach the equilibrium. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and thank you for trying to do the impossible by squeezing something so comprehensive into such limited time. We've overrun just a little bit, but we're still within the time. So let's open the questions, and let's hear what everybody has to ask. Any questions? Oh yeah, there's one right there. Just a minute, please. If you could just grab the microphone. It's because we're being webcast, you see, otherwise they can't hear your questions.
Mr. Gandel, yes. You're a professor, I understand. In which field? Is that the question? Yeah, no, that's part of the question. And you're working on complementary currencies in a call that system. It's a mutual currency. And in my research, I find that to be really successful, you also have to be able to pay taxes with the currency, because then people want to have it. And maybe you could also include rent, which is also a part which might make it successful. You catch my drift? In your implementations that use your system, has anybody tried to, was there a municipality or another body which used it to pay taxes? Have you already tried it?
Thank you. Can I?
Go.
Cheers. Yeah, I'm an adjunct professor of management with a business school in Australia and a distinguished visiting professor at IE Business School in Madrid, and soon to become a full professor of sustainability leadership. But So previously part-time, and now I'm going full-time, but that's also because I found a university that's prepared to allow me to work in this area and develop a research program and teaching around this topic, which also I think shows how this topic is evolving sufficiently now to be more recognized as something that's important to develop research and teaching and training on. Because previously most people just laughed at this area or thought it was a bit strange or whatever. And it's good to hear that you've got a research program on it. So your specific question about tax, the problem is that with these 130 schemes, we don't know enough about each of them. We don't have anyone doing evaluation at all, really, let alone in the sophisticated way that we've just heard Christoph suggest we do it. So I don't know. I don't know of any instances of our currencies where, say, a local authority has said that they would like to charge tax on those transactions in the mutual credit unit, rather than, say, a euro equivalent. And I'm totally against tax being charged on mutual credit systems on using the national money equivalent, because that exerts a downward pressure on their uptake. Rather, it's not that I don't believe in tax. I think these things would be fine to be taxed, but in the unit of exchange, which would mean that actually a government, or local government, national government, would need to become a participant in the scheme.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. I mean, not to tax the currency with national currency or international currency like the euro, but instead use your new currency to pay your tax with.
If I might answer this, and I will put on my hat of having worked for the Vice President of the European Commission for many years, it's just not legal. That's the point.
That's exactly
that's currently, tax has to be paid. That's what fiat currency means. You have to pay taxes in it. That's why we had an animated discussion about that last night. You can't even pay taxes with your credit card because it's not legal tender.
Yes, that's exactly what
So
I know of an example in Bristol where there's an agreement with the local government to accept tax in the local Bristol pound. I don't want your friends to come down tough on them, although that'd be an interesting fight. I know which side I'd be on. But in France, so most of our schemes are in France, and the law in France, as I'm aware of it, is that if this is not your primary profession, then your participation in time banks and in other mutual credit systems does not need to be declared as tax. So my understanding of it is that every jurisdiction still has some sort of different approach to dealing with this. Now, I'd like to hear from others if you know about the regulatory environment on this, although then again we shouldn't dominate this conversation with this topic, of course.
I think there's a slight misunderstanding. I think what the question is, can you pay your house tax, income tax, whatever, in this local currency? That's not currently possible. The Bristol pound has a specific position because there's a specific backbone to it. It's not a floating currency, it's a fixed one against the pound. So therefore, it is basically just representing the pound, and that's what they've done very cleverly there. But if we're going to go in a different way, it does need a slight change to the law. But as far as the Eurozone goes, again, I'm certainly not going to dominate the conversation here. As far as the Eurozone goes, right now, there is an opportunity to have some impact. There is an opportunity to have some impact, because what it is showing is that traditional cures, traditional thinking is currently not working. And they've basically thrown everything at it that they can. So maybe they'll listen. Right, sorry. Next question, anybody? Yep, gentleman in the back there.
Thanks. Josh Ryan-Collins from the New Economics Foundation in London. Christoph, I wanted to ask a question about evaluating complementary currencies. And the great challenge they have, I think, is a sort of chicken and egg problem in terms of funding and impact demonstration, because these schemes start off very small, they need very heavy subsidies and funding to get going. But it takes years, quite often, before they get to a scale where you can say, well, this is having a real economic or social impact, thereby attracting additional funding. Now, I guess this must be the case with other types of social innovation. I just wonder if there's any general approaches you would encourage us to take as innovators, or evaluation frameworks that are sort of sympathetic to this initial scaling problem. Are there particular examples you would point to? Because I think it's really key if we're going to demonstrate and make ourselves sustainable in the longer term, that we share that kind of information.
So, if I understood your question, it's about the challenge between how we can prove the impact, because in order to evaluate it, we need time. So,
Exactly, so
yeah.
3 years perhaps is an absolute minimum. So what sort of evaluation framework would you take, given the fact that these things aren't going to reach scale for such a long period?
I think, okay, as I said, few research have been made in the impact assessment concerning economic and monetary innovation, but there are few of them, and we can both use the existing research and do impact assessment on some, like maybe 5 or 10 very strong local experimentation that already exist, which is already strong, and that the impact can be proved more easily or more efficiently. And from that, we can already start to create a standard, a framework for impact evaluation. And as you said, after we will for sure have to wait some years in order to really assess this impact, because we need a baseline, we need to be agreed within indicators, for some indicators, and then we need to assess them every year, every semester, and for sure for long-term ones, we need maybe 2 or 3 years. So to start, we may start with what we have. Literature that already exists, even if it's few, and do some experimentation on local projects.
I think Jem would like to add something to that.
Yeah, on this question of monitoring evaluation of the impact of complementary or community currencies, it is a huge area, as you showed us, this whole area of monitoring and evaluation. I did a report for the UN on NGO accountability, and I think there's a danger here in overloading top-down accountability measures. We don't want to see a huge new industry of people working on monitoring and evaluation, when actually we need to help things to grow at the local level. And I know that many of the people that are users, active users in our currency systems, the ones that we support rather, that use our software, are actually against the idea that anyone would be making a lot of bank money out of what they're doing, because they feel themselves as part of a movement, and their user feedback is very key to helping ensure that our systems are really delivering for them. So they're partners in this. And so the idea that then suddenly you'll have a huge new industry of NGO bodies going and monitoring what they're doing, I think that also just goes against the whole philosophy here. It's about autonomy. It's not about looking nicer for funders. It's about, they want to create systems that don't require any money from the yin economy. So I think we need to not just take existing thinking and apply it here. We need to understand there's a political dimension to this as well. It's about autonomy, it's about freedom, and also recognize some issues around fairness, and that we don't want some sort of class of experts sitting on top of the field of alternative monetary innovation. So a little bit more empathy and conversation with people who are participating on this day to day, and making sure that they participate in shaping what's considered the kind of evaluation that is credible, I think is key.
And I think this is a dilemma. This is like on one side you have the funders. The funders want or need their impact system, their methodology. And on the other side, you have the project leaders of these complementary currencies. We don't really want or need this kind of impact assessment for their own improvement. But if they do so, I think it should respect the movement of the complementary currency, which is a bottom-up approach. So we have those two things, like on one side the funders, we have this top-down approach, and then the community complementary currency, which have this bottom-up approach. And each of them have their impact methodology. So we may need like intercessor. We treat this information for the funders, but also for the project leaders in order to help them to improve themselves. But for sure, I'm agree with Jim that this kind of standards framework don't have to be as big and as huge as it is nowadays for development project, and it don't have to be made in a top-down approach, but in a bottom-up one.
I'm looking at the time, and unfortunately, there's the gentleman in the middle there. I'll go first. If you can.
Okay, but
that gentleman, and I will then come to you. It's just I'm trying to be fair, and I'll ask the speakers up front here to keep their answers relatively short because we're keeping everybody from their coffee.
Yes. I'd just like to put a question to the panel. Based on the definition of community, which I understand, I'm not a Latin scholar, but I understand comes from people coming together in units who give presence to each other, who share their skills and abilities with one another. I'd like to put a general question, which is, to what extent have you seen complementary currencies being able to strengthen and enhance community spirit in communities? It would be a very interesting question. Does it actually strengthen them? Because one of the problems with globalization is dividing communities. Thank you.
Please, who wants to take this? Bart, we haven't heard from you yet.
I do not have a concrete experience on this issue because I've worked on theory for 3 years. I have been in a community currency for some time, and yes, it does help to forge bonds between people, but it was in a large city, so people were spread around different locations, so you could not say it was a community.
Yes, definitely for the people who participate in it. In the Celle du Lac around Geneva, people come together once a month. And there was even some suspicion at the outset about going online and whether that would mean there would be less face-to-face interaction. It's a real, it's a key aspect of it, the coming together, and that is also everyone brings some food as well. So there are questions therefore about how much you can scale that, because if you can have tens of thousands of people coming together, can they really do that? But I think that's a question of organisation and how do you manage that, rather than it meaning that it's a fatal flaw in the system. It's amazing that it helps you to think about how are you valuable to your neighbours as opposed to some global system. So me as a consultant, I think, well, how on earth can I really provide value to these people? It's quite a challenge for me. It's also made me think about diversifying what I do, and also finding a community that I can commit to long term. So it has a number of impacts on the individual, thinking about who you are, what you do, where you live, how you're valuable to each other.
Now, to the independent journalist up there, it's your turn, if you want to ask a question.
I just put my answer. So.
Okay, well in that case, so much better. Okay, very last question.
Okay. I would think that it does seem to me that the problem is the sort of communication between the national currency and the community currency. But I would think you could actually value these things in the national currency without needing any national currency. In other words, it's all credit. Well, I know they do this with the trade barter systems, where they actually value all these raw materials in dollars, let's say, but they're not using dollars. They have these big indexes where you can figure out what your product's worth, and then when you first join this community, you get a certain amount of credit, and you're allowed to spend that credit. So let's say you're a manufacturer and you can buy all these raw materials that you need for your product, and you use your credits to buy those raw materials that otherwise were sitting on the shelves and nobody wanted. They were unsold goods, but that are actually perfectly good goods. And then you can make your product out of that, and then you trade it with the community. So in other words, you never actually you don't need any dollars to do it. But because everybody knows what a dollar is worth, you can tell what your product's worth. And they actually, with the trade barter systems, they actually do pay taxes in dollars. And that counts it counts with the GDP. You can see how much you actually produce with this system of goods that, because there weren't enough dollars in the system, they wouldn't have sold in the ordinary system, but in the barter system they do sell. So they obviously have a value and they're adding to GDP.
Yeah, many, or in fact most of the mutual credit systems that are running on our servers, as far as I'm aware, do have a are notionally equivalent to, pegged to the national currency. So that is happening. The key thing, though, is that they are not convertible to it. And so the problem is that if you have an alternative currency where you have to buy into it with the national currency, that's not providing an autonomous, self-issued means of exchange. The only other problem with in a mutual credit setup where it's notionally equivalent to a national currency is that what happens if with spiraling inflation and so on. But I think the benefits that you've outlined of using a peg to a national currency outweigh the negative side. Some people are concerned, though, if these things are at a very low level, that actually they would prefer something like beads or some other concept. Time banks, for example, can get more government support, it seems, at the moment, because it's seen as just a sort of an entirely alternative economy. It's not an informal economy that actually encroaches into the real economy that would be your tax base. So I think there's a whole bunch of issues to work through around this, but definitely using a national peg is one useful way to go.
Okay, Christoph, if you can answer, sure, please.
First of all, concerning the local empowerment, I think this is one of the objectives of a complementary currency, is to create an identity, trust, and energy flow within a community. And this is thanks to that you create the empowerment. So for sure, this is one of the objectives of the complementary currency, and this is one of the way to create this empowerment. To answer to your question, why we need conventional money, why we need this energy from the young economy, is because there's this challenge in the gap between the first step of a complementary currency project and let's say the last step where we reach the scale we wanted, like let's say 500 business and maybe 500 user and 100 businesses, maybe that could be a typing point. But to reach this typing point where finally the complementary currency have enough value to value the time and the competency of people, because this is the purpose of a currency, it should be a complementary currency. To reach this stage and finally to be less dependent from conventional money, we may need money, because I think there's two ways of thinking. The first way is to say, okay, we can do this, we can reach this stage only thanks to volunteering and based on a complementary currency valuation. But the fact is, with complementary currency valuation during this stage, the value is not strong enough in order to really access to the diversity of service and goods. Or we can use money for this stage, because thanks to the money, then you can really value and have access to all the service and goods. So I think this is really a key question, but we can either do the one you said, or either thanks to money, or both.
All right, thank you. Now, in order not to be impolite to the next session, we have 4 minutes before the next session starts. All right, we have overrun. It's great that the discussions are so animated, and I have the impression if we had another half an hour, another 2 hours, we would still be here. So it is with great regret that I bring this session to a close. Coffee is waiting for you out in the balmy heat. But before you leave, not that quick. I just want to draw your attention to your conference proceedings. There's a one-pager loose in there. It's called Power to the Euro. It is a draft of a possible declaration. Look at it. If you have comments, write them on the back and hand them in at the front desk. The one thing I do want to put to your attention is the idea behind this is to give something action-oriented, something which can be implemented, because, as I said before, there is an opportunity right now to maybe have some impact in the euro area. This is the place where right now I would say everything is burning, and where we can maybe do some good, and we can maybe have some impact and some influence. So think about that. If you can, what my suggestion would be, if you have one suggestion, one advice to the European policymakers right now, what would it be? Put it on the back, because that's what they need right now. They don't need big philosophy, they need clear actions. They're desperate. Thank you. Coffee's waiting.